Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of MatChat brought to you by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike gear, Pure and Clean Sports, and Resilite.com, the mat company. We appreciate them. Joined today by probably the coach of the team that's had the best first half of the year so far from Iowa State University, Kevin Dresser. Coach, I've had a chance to text with you a couple times, but publicly, congratulations on SIHOK and on CKLV. It's been a heck of a 10, 11 days for you guys.
Yeah, I told the guys last night on the way home from the airport in the bus, I said, you guys had a pretty amazing 6 days from Sunday to the following Saturday. So hats off to them because they answered the challenge that we put in front of them as coaches to get something done back to back and show everybody that you guys just weren't a flash in the pan last Sunday. You came back and you competed and reinforced that you might be okay.
Yeah. We did a preview of the tournament, and I said, I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa State had a bit of an emotional letdown, winning that match on ESPN. The viewership was amazing. So many toss-up matches, all that stuff. I think it's human nature. Maybe the guys don't perform quite as well. And in some ways, I mean, a couple guys maybe not wrestle quite as well, but a lot of guys wrestle their freaking fannies off. When you put the schedule, I'm going to try to ask some questions maybe not everybody else has asked. When you put the schedule together, obviously your team last year didn't make the qualifications for the national duels. I mean, this is a heck of a front-loaded part of the year with SIHOK, CKLV. There's a week or so in there, and then you guys go duel Ohio State, and maybe people didn't know how good Ohio State was going to be in the preseason, but everybody knows Ohio State is typically a very good team. So maybe what was the thought process behind, putting all that together in like 23 days?
I wanted to really test them, and obviously anytime you wrestle Iowa is a test. And we did that the last couple of years where we went from Iowa to right to Las Vegas Invitational. And so, 2 years ago we won it. We had a good year. I think there's periods where you have to test them. We get a week off. It's exams week. We're going to get ready for exams. Exams start next Monday, and so this is the last week of school, and we'll kind of dial things back for a couple days here, and then we'll get back after later in the week. We'll have a week off, so we need to be ready to go and continue to this is college wrestling, and if you want to perform on Friday and Saturday at the NCAA tournament, you got to put back-to-back things together and hard days together. And so I think that was the intent when we put together the schedule. And, we get done and we get a weekend off, and then we got Stanford and Arizona State back-to-back. And Stanford's really, they get all their guys in the lineup. They're definitely a top 10 team if they've got a full lineup. So there's no rest for the weary.
Yeah. And the Larkin boys have looked good early on for Arizona State as well. Yeah. Yep. So I was very curious. I was at the national duels, and we had talked about afterwards, how Ohio State kind of ran and hid 125 to 157, but the duel may have felt differently, like if they had drawn and started at 165, where Iowa kind of ran off and hid. For people that don't know, how does the selection of who starts, at what weight you start, do the coaches have to agree? And then if they don't agree, they flip a coin, and one, like if it comes up, red or black in the Iowa State thing, like walk us through that process so people can kind of understand that.
Yes, the coaches have to agree. So if we, for instance, agree that, hey, we're going to start at 165, then we can start at 165. Obviously, traditionally, a lot of times coaches agree to start at 125 because that's just kind of always the starting weight. If they don't agree on it, then you flip a coin and the winner gets to pick the weight. Pretty simple. Used to be back, 5-10 years ago that they put all 10 weights in a hat and you draw. If you didn't agree, and you draw out of that hat, and you never knew what you were going to get. Now, if you don't agree, you can flip a coin. If you win the flip, you can automatically pick the weight you want, which is what we did at Iowa.
And then how does it work with, I've seen, does the home team have to put their guy on the mat first every weight, or is it every other weight, or how does that work?
Yeah, then the other team that loses the flip, they get choice, odd or even. So they get the choice, like if they say, okay, we want odd, then on the odd matches, they get choice in the second period. They can obviously pick top, bottom, neutral, or defer.
You're pretty transparent. Where did Iowa want to start the duel?
125. That's
Yeah.
That's kind of some coaches are really traditional. Very rarely have I ever seen Iowa want to start anywhere. Some people are just very traditional. Most of the time we're probably that way 70% of the time, but every now and then, for whatever reasons, you sometimes I've had coaches agree that, like, if you just have a marquee match where you have two guys that are just the best two guys, and that's the one everybody's waiting for. We've done that a couple times with David Carr, where we made David Carr. I think we did that in the dual meet at Missouri, where David Carr and Keegan O'Toole were
Yeah.
out. I think that's just good from a kind of a crescendo type situation, So, but everybody's different.
So in that scenario, you and Smith agreed to just start at 174 and then and then done.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So one of the interesting things I find with coaches at the highest level is how important are wrestle-offs versus, behavior, academic progress, leadership on the team, doing extra workouts, all those things. Like you obviously had a major log jam with a bunch of guys between, it felt like 25 and 57. And I don't want to say it thinned itself out. I'm pretty sure you had some active hand in how it's thinned out the way it has. But there are really good kids wrestling on all different teams across the country now that at one point or another were in that room. How do you decide when a wrestle-off is the way to do it versus, hey, we're just picking this guy, or is it always a wrestle-off or always we pick the guy?
I wish I had a drop-dead universal, this is how you do it 100% of the time answer, but I don't. But I do think number one, you have to be in good standing, I think, with the team. That means academically, socially, Matt, you controlling your weights under control. I think there's some criteria in there that you gotta earn the right to wrestle off at a weight. You just can't, say, hey, I want to wrestle off this weight. And that's kind of the beginning of the year. So I like to go 2 out of 3s, because I think it's one match, anything can happen. But if you go best 2 out of 3s, I think it's a little bit fairer. And then I think if you didn't end up on the winning side of that 2 out of 3, like at 49, we had one guy win the first one and the other guy win the next 2. If you want to wrestle yourself back into the equation, I look at it like 1 or 2 things have to happen. The guy that's the number one guy has to fall down over and over, just have not compete well. Or the other guy's got to get himself in some big time tournaments and go beat some ranked guys. And then I think you can open it up. That's just my philosophy. Some people like to have it all over and done with, but I don't, because it's a long season and some guys, one guy might be improving and the other guy might be doing a bad job with his weight. So I never ever say drop dead. Yep, you're the guy all year long. I think you always have to continue to prove yourself, especially if you want to be in a chase for a trophy at the end of the year. You got to have guys performing for you.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, my dad and I did this a long time ago. It's tough where, like, if you and I are on the same team, how much time I'm working on trying to figure out how to beat you versus working out, trying to win nationals. And clearly, if I was in your league as good as you were, it would be one and the same. If I could figure out you, I would probably be good enough to win nationals. But it is like, okay, hey, I mean, when a guy's got a move named after him, like the dresser dump, like I probably need to avoid that move where not everybody else is as good as that. So, I mean, I guess what you're saying, like at 49, like if Frost were to fall off or if Johnson were to go wrestle and win a bunch of ranked guys, then there could be another wrestle off. But if Frost continues to sort of stay as a top 5 guy, then that would kind of be it for the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think if a guy's proven, and obviously in terms of qualifications and seeds and everything, you might have, you might not have the very best guy potentially at that weight in late February, early March, but the other guy's been in there so much and he's created a national ranking and he's got all of the criteria to get an automatic bid for the conference. So those factors are important. That's why I say, the first wrestle-offs isn't the end-all be-all, but man, it really puts you in the driver's seat because now you're going to get the reps. Now you're going to get, win percentage. You're going to get RPI. You're going to get coaches ranking opportunities where if you're the backup guy, it's really hard to get those.
Your I don't want to say more honest because I don't want to say anything negative about anybody else, but you're as honest as anybody in the country about sort of saying the things out loud that a lot of coaches talk to me off air about, and, so like you mentioned after the SIHOK duel, like, hey, CKLV is really important for seeding, for the NCAA, for the Big 12, and then, people say the coaches have nothing to do with the NCAA seeding, and that's false because the coaches' rankings are a part of the formula. And a lot of times I've had coaches call me and they're like, I don't know who to rank here. Like, your job is to coach Iowa State. It's not to know who's better between like Purdue and Northwestern at 174 pounds as an example. Your job is to get MJ Gaitan as ready as possible at that weight class, or whatever the case may be. So when you go to a tournament like CKLV, like one of the things I was impressed by was at national duels, people didn't duck for the most part. I was really surprised by that. Like, I didn't think we'd get Ferrari Sinclair if the duel was out of reach, and the duel was out of reach and they wrestled. So do you think we're trending more towards guys just wrestling and guys not being pulled or coaches not protecting them as much? Or do you think that was more because there was money involved?
I think the money component makes it, makes the so-called ducking, I guess, less likely. I think that there's always going to be strategy. You'll see sometimes a kid beats a kid, and then you get to the dual meet later on. A coach might not throw the kid out there because they want to protect that number 1 seed at the conference tournament. I could tell you with me personally, again, and just being transparent, is if we've got an injury situation. Obviously we didn't wrestle a couple guys in the last round on Saturday, and we had a situation where we had 2 injuries. And to be quite honest, you don't have an MRI machine there, and you don't have all this technology with you. So you make a game time decision. Like, if I wrestle this kid one more time, is he going to be able to go to Ohio State, or is he going to be done for a month? How serious is his injury? And so you err on the side of it's got to be a conversation between the athlete, the kid, and the trainer. It's not just me saying, hey, because if I got a guy that if his leg's hanging off of his body and he's wrestling, right? Because it's I'm not going to take a match away from a kid unless and obviously most kids are intelligent. When I say his leg's falling off his body, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
If this kid tells me, hey, I can go, it hurts, but I can go, then I'm going to take, I'm going to let the kid go. But if I sense that, okay, we're putting this kid out here and we could make a small situation into a real big situation, then that's when we get the trainer involved. That's when we get the athlete involved. So that's just the way that we do it. But I think ducking guys and not, wait till the end of the year, man, I don't know. That's never worked. It didn't work for me as an athlete. I think you need to feel as many hard things as you can feel. I think you need to be put in as many tough situations as you can, because, when you get the NCAA tournament, nothing's going to go perfect for 3 days. And if you haven't grinded at some point during the year, man, you might be lucky and be able to go through that gauntlet. But I just think the guys that have had to grind and put themselves out there, and you learn the most about yourself. You learn your strengths, your weaknesses. I think getting a loss during the season is an awesome thing. I think it gives you focus. I think it wakes you up. So getting a loss isn't the end of the world. So, we're going to put them out there. And then when you don't wrestle a kid, people are like, oh, you're ducking this guy, you're ducking that guy. No, there might be coaches out there that are ducking. We're not ducking, but we're not going to put a kid out there that's injured either right now.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody important in my life, and I was telling them about the importance of suffering, and that if you don't suffer, you're eventually going to suffer. Like, something bad's going to happen, and it's what you're saying. And sports are a metaphor for life, and wrestling's really freaking hard. And it's not like you beat me in golf and you just talk. Like, if you beat me in wrestling, it's very personal and emasculating and all those things. And if you're not willing to suffer now, you will eventually suffer. And those. Like in high school when I was wrestling, it's less now, but like there's these guys would come in and they were 29-0 and they'd wrestled nobody, and then they lose the first round of state or something and people are surprised. And you're like, well, they wrestled 29 guys that'll never wrestle again in their life. So of course they were 29-0.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for what you call battle tested. Like, I think those kids that show up that are battle tested, And that's what, that's what everybody always, so you wrestle in the Big Ten, you got to learn how to grind. And there's some truth to that. Look at what our schedule is this year. I mean, West Virginia is really good this year. We got West Virginia. Arizona State's really improved this year. We got Arizona State. We got Missouri. We got Stanford. We got Iowa. We got Oklahoma State. Oklahoma's gotten better. Like there's not very few layups in college wrestling, and especially if you schedule right. Like we going from Iowa to Vegas to Ohio State and then Lehigh immediately after we step off the mat with Ohio State. We got Lehigh. You're going to know where you're at by the time you go home for Christmas break.
Yeah, you picked. I mean, to a certain part, the conference schedule gets dictated to you guys, but to pick those non-conference events the way you have, and to have those matches, especially since you guys weren't in national duels this year. Obviously next year, unless there's an apocalypse, you guys would qualify for that tournament. I thought it was interesting because whenever something happens, there's always fallout down the road, either more positive or negative. And I thought the negative fallout from national duels were Ohio State, Nebraska, a couple teams were not there at the national duels that normally go. Virginia Tech sent guys but didn't send their starting 10. There's a third team that I can't think of right now, and I apologize, but that traditionally do very well there. And so the field was different.
Right.
And so I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Are you a big proponent of having like the NCAA tournament being duels, and they have an individual tournament where no team score is kept? Do you like it the way it is? Like if you're the commissioner for the day, what do you do?
I like having both. I just don't see why the NCAA can't give 2 trophies. I think they do in other sports. I mean, I think they give a cross country trophy and they give a track and field trophy and they give an indoor trophy and an outdoor trophy. So to me, it's like if they can do that, why can't they give a dual meet champion and an individual tournament champion? They never ever could give me a good reason for that. It's like, they say, oh, we can only give 1 trophy. Well, I think the more good products you have, the more people turn on the TV. I mean, you saw the numbers of the SIHOK duel. Over 300,000 people watched it. That's our, if we want to grow the sport, we got to start people watching duels because they're a lot easier to figure out. You try to take a brand new person to a 3-day tournament in March and try to explain the rules to them. It's worse than advanced calculus. It's no way. I have to ask every year, how many points we score this round? And I've been doing this my whole life. So it's just but for the diehard wrestling people, the NCAA tournament's the greatest product we got. And I agree with that. So I don't think we want to change that ever. But I do think that if we could figure out a way to, make a dual meet tournament too, I think that'd be really cool.
Your comment about how many points made me have a flashback to when I was coaching with my dad. So there'd be at least one role as an assistant coach that I'd be okay at, because I did take advanced calculus at Iowa State, and he did have me do that math for him.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that's really interesting about your team in particular is the culture. You have the guys seem very close. I'm sure that's not seem, they are. David Carr, he's doing vlogs and stuff. And, even though even though he's ran out of eligibility, probably the best way to say it, he's still it feels like a key member of the team. Nate Carr clearly doing a completely unbiased job on the play-by-play. So,
yeah.
I mean, tell me a little bit about blending like the Frosts, the Cubans, with your portal guys like Steve-O and Vinny and Rocky. I mean, I like 2 of those guys wrestled in my event, one of them multiple times. So I kind of know those guys very well. Like how quick, like, is it a team meeting in August? Is it stuff you guys are doing in July? Because I do believe culture makes a difference. I mean, I know it's an individual sport, but they keep team score. And especially in duels, like, hey, I'm going to try to get a major. Like, even though Bastida didn't get the major, from the outside looking in, it looked really like he was really trying to. And even though Echemendia didn't quite get the tech, it felt like he was really trying to. Like, how important – that's not how important. How do you make culture happen when people are coming there from so many different walks of life and are there for different periods of time?
I don't think it's one meeting or one like, hey, you guys got to get along. I think it's just got to kind of organically happen. And, personalities are personalities. I mean, I have had teams before that were really good that, a lot of the guys in the team didn't get along. But they when it came time to wrestle, they could really they all wanted to win. But it is nicer when you do. And we do have a group that gets along really, really well right now. And I think it just comes with, putting them together so much. We have a message every day. We try to deliver to them. Sometimes it's about, the little things away from the room. Sometimes it's about the things in the room. Sometimes it's about their grades. But this group, for whatever reason, has really kind of gelled quickly. And I felt like really from day one. And we were together pretty much as a team for about 3 weeks in July. Everybody. And that's kind of how it started. And we sent everybody home for a month and we came back, and I just felt like this group was pretty close. Nobody likes to wrestle each other off. So you get some feelings that are hurt. But other than that, we haven't had any issues, which is kind of unusual because you always usually have a couple guys in the locker room that you need them to be better teammates, but we're pretty lucky right now.
So it's a combination of, like you said, organically, but also stressing it. And then sometimes you get lucky and you recruit good kids that also are good wrestlers that also happen to be good human beings.
Yeah. So it definitely isn't a, one meeting, hey, we're going to do it this way kind of thing. You can't do that with this generation. It's got to be, you got to trick them and make it their idea. If you try to go old school and smack your fist on the table, then they're all going to run the other way. I've learned that you got to trick them and make it their idea. And if you can make it their idea, then you're going to go a long ways.
That's the number one rule of sales, actually.
Right.
It's literally in every sales training I've ever said learned is your idea has to become the customer's idea. So that's fascinating. Tell me a little bit about the portal. I mean, I've had conversations with you and other coaches offline. It feels like A, you have to embrace it, and B, it's sort of the opposite of coaching, right? Like, coaching at the lowest levels, like some coach that takes a kid that doesn't know what a knee pad is or a drop step is or any of these things and teaches them to be good is doing completely different work than a coach that gets a guy from a program that maybe wants to go to a better program, better workout partners, better training partners, better facility, better conference, better whatever, better coaching, better technique analysis, any of that stuff. You seem like a guy, again, who's like, okay, well, this is the new playing field. These are the rules. Really doesn't matter if I like it or not. If I want to win, I got to embrace it. What do you think about it in general? And do you feel like it's helping the sport, hurting the sport, or how we feel is irrelevant?
Well, I don't think it's helping the sport at all. I don't think it's helping any sports. I think when you put the portal in, I don't know who came up with that idea and why. The NCAA always wants to give the kids all of the benefit of the doubt, and we got to do everything because we don't want the kids to think they're being cheated and everything. But at the same time, we went so far in that these kids can just go every year. And you're right, if you're forced to play it. The first year that it was really a thing in wrestling, I stayed away from it. I just didn't like it. And I learned that, hey, those 3 or 4 kids that we could have maybe, had a shot at, if we would have had them, we would have won more. And more importantly, because we didn't go after them and somebody else did, they won at a much higher level. And so, we obviously were more aggressive in it this year, and we got some kids out of the portal. Ultimately, we want to recruit well and develop well in the Frosts of the world. But we want that to be our model. But in situations where you're deficient in an area or two, and somebody really good pops up, and you can go from an NCAA qualifier to a slam dunk All-American, you're forced to play the game.
What are your thoughts? Like, I had a high school coach of a number 1 ranked guy in the country tell me that the kid was called by another kid to try to tell that guy to flip his commitment.
There's all kinds of stuff that goes on between other wrestlers, between club coaches, it's just amazing. There's coaches out there that are forced, really trying to force kids in the portal. It's just the whole thing is just such a, again, I go back to whoever created it. Obviously whoever created this rule should have consulted with coaches, because we could have told them what was going to happen. But instead you go make a rule. You don't even talk to the people that are going to live that rule. And we could have avoided a lot of this stuff.
Well, the NCAAs are 0 for 5,000 in lawsuits, so that's why they committed. That's why they created the portal, was to not have a bunch of. Well, the other thing that I've talked about is where they say, well, all these NIL, which is tied obviously to portal, all these NIL offers are going to be reviewed. It's literally mathematically impossible. Like if you take the number of college football teams there are and multiply it by the number of athletes and the number of deals, you'd have to hire 27 people full time. And then the other thing is somebody can say they're doing something and just lie. And no one's checking up to see if they, like you said, you'd come on at 1:30 today. Like if we had signed a contract, if you don't show up at 1:30, there's not any ramifications of that. Right. And so it's amazing to me because like kids are being promised money coming out of high school that legally they can't be promised because the NIL thing hasn't been reviewed yet, supposedly. For
legality. If people do their work in the new CSC, if enforcement people do their job, I should say. And again, I question just the volume. I mean, supposedly there's 4 people working in that office. There's no way 4 people can review all of those contracts. But if they do their job, there's going to be a lot of disappointed people starting this summer, this fall when everybody enrolls in school, because there's a lot of those deals that are still sitting on the desk that haven't been approved. And so enforcement is going to be, this can really turn into the wild, wild west, or else if enforcement does their job, we can put the genie back in the bottle a little bit. You're never going to be able to put it in there where there's going to be some at least law and order in that, you just can't be handing out these money from donors anymore. There has to be a checks and balances. It's got to be looked at. It's got to be reviewed. And it's got to be approved. And if it isn't looked at and approved, then there's serious penalty. You're ineligible, you're fined, whatever. Then, when you start making kids ineligible because they don't pay the money back or they don't submit the contract, then guess what? We've got law and order again because everybody wants to play. That's what needs to happen. Now, can enforcement do that? Because right now they're saying that, there's a hotline. You could call a hotline and say, guess what? I think old Fred over there at so state is cheating. Then boom, they jump in and start investigating it. Anonymous hotline, right? So if that's really the case, then you're going to get a lot of phone calls.
There's going to be a lot of burner phones bought. A lot of people with voice analyzers.
Yeah. So, and again, I think it's kind of funny to think about, but at the end of the day, if enforcement works, there's going to be a lot of kids because there's coaches out there promising kids deals that aren't even legal, like crazy deals.
Right. I mean, let's take wrestling out of it. Like a kid gets a $2 million offer in football. Like,
it's not in the rev share. If it's not their rev share money, then it's got to go through Deloitte, and Deloitte's got to approve it. So you don't get it. Now, if you don't turn the contract in and submit it and somebody finds out, then you sit until you pay it back.
Yeah, I'm a sport. I love wrestling, but I'm an overall sports fan. And so I saw Indiana win the Big Ten in football. And they haven't won the Big Ten, I think, outright since 1967. Okay. And so whoever did that stuff, that coach and those guys, like, it feels like they've earned their money, so to speak. But the interesting part of it, Coach, is like how many more T-shirts are being sold for Indiana football and who's getting the money? Because you can argue like, okay, if Iowa State beat Iowa and 10,000 more T-shirts were sold at $30 a piece and somehow they were a cost of $5, then you made $25, you can do all the math. Like that money can arguably go to the kids or the coaching staff or whoever because you got that win and it's directly correlated to it. But a bunch of it's just smoke and mirrors, it feels like.
I agree.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the 5 for 5 rule? Like none of these Olympic red shirts, none of these injury red shirts, you get 5 credits.
Tabled for 2 years. It's tabled for 2 years. I don't know if it'll happen. I would like it. I think it takes a lot of the paperwork and, it's so easy to get a medical red shirt right now. It's just, why we got these kids that are so old. It's so easy to get a medical red shirt, And again, you're forced to play the rules. I mean, if you could get one and you're in a situation where it's going to benefit your athlete and your team, you're going to go for it. But it'd be nice if they just came in and, hey, if you got hurt 4 of those 5 years, then you only got 1 year to show your stuff. I think it's easier and simpler, and you're going to get less 24, 25-year-olds.
It was very difficult when I was doing rankings on a weekly basis and the COVID thing happened. You felt yourself having to go back and look at everybody's eligibility. Like, is Kevin Dresser a junior or a senior or a red shirt?
It's the last year of the COVID babies right here. So they're done after this year.
We can go back to normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very, very complicated. So, yeah, I don't know. It feels tricky. The year you guys took 4th and they did, in fact, finally get you a trophy. I don't think I spoke to you. How important was it to actually get the trophy? Like, I saw you guys were very smart on social media, actually opening the box and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
How important was that?
I think the fact that, we put ourselves in a position to get in the top 5 and the growth that we had in our program over 6 or 7 years was the most important thing. Obviously, a trophy's nice for the bling and the media and the guys and that fun part of it. And that's part of it too, because kids like to be involved in ceremonies and recognition. And we got in the fall, we went out in the football field and they held the trophy up in front of, 60,000 people. So from the fanfare side of it, and the marketing side of it, it was good. But, at the same time, we left Kansas City that year knowing that we had a pretty dang good tournament. And we had a pretty good team, so we didn't need a trophy to convince us of that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of bling, you've got some pretty awesome bling in your office there, and I think the one is that Coach Nichols over your other shoulder?
I got Coach Nichols up here somewhere. I got Chris a lot of famous Cyclones here. Coach Nichols and Chris Taylor, yeah.
Coach Nichols was my dad's mentor in wrestling. He was a graduate assistant at Iowa State and had never really wrestled till college, didn't wrestle in high school at all. And Coach Nichols and Coach Anderson were kind of the ones that taught him wrestling. And Coach Nichols co-signed on my dad's first house. That's how good of a friend he was. So I saw that it brings a warm spot to my heart. Sorry to take it down a personal note for it. So, you guys have obviously had a great first half of the year, keeping people healthy and everything. When you get through these collegiate duels, the ones that are coming up with Lehigh and Ohio State, and then you hit the Big Ten schedule, how much coaches all look at, or coaching staffs do this differently. How much is it with you're doing one-on-ones with guys? Is it small group? How much is it, 35 guys in the room? What's the breakdown? Does it get more one-on-one-ish as you get closer to the end of the year?
We do individuals at least once a week on average. Sometimes when we're not in classes, we'll do 2 a week. But right now, just because we've got, our kids have a lot going on with school as well, obviously. We do an individual once a week, and I kind of break those guys up with individual coaches. So, we got different coaches working with those guys. I kind of just observe from the outside and assign different guys. Sometimes, David might be in there working with them, or Coach Carr, because from the RTC component, Chris Perry, Coach Fernando, Coach St. John, Coach Metcalf. So we'll have individuals at least once a week, and I just kind of walk around and observe. And a lot of times, if I'm doing meetings or fundraising, I'm doing those while those guys are in individuals in the morning. And then the afternoon practices generally from the conditioning and the hard wrestling part, I run those, and from a technique, if we're going to do any skill development that day as a team, some days I'll do it, some days Metcalf will do it, some days St. John will do it, some days David Carr will do it, some days some guys in the team will do it. We'll bring in our guys that are really good at something and have them teach their buddies. But from the hard training and from that point on, I do that. So that's how we break it down. Everybody does it different, but I try to make sure that everybody's involved in either a morning or an afternoon workout.
As you run through the names, I think like somebody like me, I know your staff, you're, the head assistant, lead assistant, or whatever you call it, and then Perry, and then Fernando Villascuz is one of the funniest guys I've ever talked to. By the way, I'm talking about, this, but just like deadpan, just one-liner perfect. And then My family and I were very close to David Carr growing up, or Nate Carr rather, growing up, and to see David doing so well. But it feels like there's probably not a position in the world that a kid couldn't get a really good answer from one of those group of 5 or 6 guys there, I would think, right? Like, wherever they're struggling, there's an answer, right?
I just am blessed to have such a good staff, because at the end of the day, you're only as good. And I know it sounds kind of cliche, but you're only as good as the people around you. My job is to organize and put the right people in the right places to give us the best chance to win. That's my job. And I think we've chosen good people.
One last question. I know your time is valuable. You are maybe the only coach that I can think of off the top of my head at a top 10 team that actually coached high school. And I know you've expounded upon the lessons you learned there and all that. I don't want to ask you to repeat yourself. We have a lot of coaches that watch these kind of podcasts. Maybe there's a coach that's watching that doesn't have the program the way where they want it right now, or he or she wants it, and they're trying to build the program. Anybody can sort of catch lightning in a bottle, and a kid happen to live in your school district, or be an alumni and transfer in or private school or whatever. What's maybe 1 or 2 tips on you've obviously built programs at both levels. For people that don't know, your team was a national power in high school and won state on a massively consistent basis. And I think everybody's pretty aware that Iowa State was pretty low when you got there, and they're not low at all now. So that's not an accident. So without asking you for the entire blueprint, maybe what is something tangible that a coach could take away, or even a parent, like, hey, this is how you build up young men and women. Any words of wisdom would be greatly appreciated.
When I am asked to speak or get in front of high school coaches, it's like anything else. Like, what's your goals? I think you have to define your goals. Do you want to win in your district, your region? Do you want to win at the state level? Do you want to win at the national level? And obviously, the higher your goals, the higher level of commitment and higher level of effort you're going to have to put into it. And generally, the coaches that show up at those things are the most driven coaches. The coaches that don't give a rip, they don't show up to the extra clinics and stuff like that. So I always assume that there's a pretty high level of desire for those coaches, that they want to have great programs. So one of the first things I tell them is you have to have a tremendous feeder program. I was fortunate. My first job was Grundy High School in Grundy, Virginia, and they had it going on when I got there at 25 years old. They had a feeder system of almost 300 kids that fed a AA school out of single A, AA, AAA in Virginia back in those days. And so every kid in that whole school system got exposed to wrestling. And I'm telling you what, if you get 300 kids in your youth program, would translate into about 50 kids in your middle school, which would translate into about 35 or 40 kids in your high school. But all of those kids that I got had been wrestling for 7 or 8 years by the time I got them. Think about that. So I learned real quick the importance of large numbers. I call it the law of large numbers, that you got to get a lot of kids involved in your program. And so that means work. Then when I went to Christiansburg, it was just the opposite. They didn't have hardly any kids in their program. They had a very small youth program. They had a very small middle school program, pretty much non-existent. I think they only had 15 kids in the high school team. And so that's where my work was, is I had to really get out. And so I did about every PE class you could do. At the elementary school and the middle school, I did every PE class for a whole week, just to get those kids exposed to wrestling and teach them the rules. And then provide them a program, a short 5-week program. And that's really kind of how we kicked it off. And I had to do that every year for I was there 10 years. I did it every right after the state tournament every year for 5 years. And we got huge numbers. And guess what? We started winning state titles in year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It was a byproduct of it. That's where it starts, is getting a lot of large numbers. And then, what happens is once you get really good in this day and age of crazy parents, kids start moving in. You get crucified as a coach going, you're recruiting. I'm like, man, I got kids showing up at my school. I've never even met their parents. I've never even met the kid. And we had kids literally showing up to school just because they wanted to get in a good program.
Yeah, it does. That does happen. We've heard plenty of stories where that didn't happen, but that does happen as well.
You're never going to stop parents from moving to better their kid. You're never going to stop. You're never going to stop them. And what I found out was when I was at Christiansburg, the parents were recruiting the parents because these kids that all traveled on the youth circuit so much.
Yes.
These parents that all these kids and these families go to the same tournament. We kind of use that today in colleges. If you can really get kind of a little niche and get on a roll, is if you get a really good high school or an area where everybody knows everybody, and then you get a really good kid from that either team or area, and you say, hey, what about old Joe, your teammate? Oh, yeah, I know Joe. His mom and dad are at my house right now. You start to get some synergy there, you know. It happens at the high school all the time.
Yeah. I'll tell a quick story and get out of your hair. There was a coach here locally that basically coached 4 months of the year, you know, opened the gym on February or November 1, got out February 28, and he was upset that another school nearby was, recruiting his kids. They want to move, whatever. It's a private school. And I'm like, you would not sign up with your spouse for a 4 month of the year relationship, you know, like where they could, you know, go be single on spring break and 4th of July and stuff like that. You know, it's like it's these kids that want to win. They're committed to doing it 12 months of the year. I mean, like the guys that you have, like when you send them home for a week or 2 weeks, whatever, they're not wakeboarding, you know, they're lifting and running and wrestling with the people back home. And if you're not committed to it 12 months, they're going to go somewhere where somebody's as committed as they are. So
Absolutely.
Coach, it's, I'm sure you've gotten this a lot, but congratulations on the start this year. It was awfully impressive. You're very good at giving the folks that are part of the success their due and honoring them and acknowledging them. That at the end of the day, there is a person in charge. So congratulations. I wish you luck. I wish you good health. I hope everybody just stays healthy till March and then, you know, let it rip and see how it goes. And if I don't see you in person before then, I'll definitely stop by and say hi at the Big 12s.
All right, come to Hilton. So you always have tickets at Hilton, my friend.
I always have tickets. I will remember that. I actually, Eddie Woody will be happy to hear that because he wants me to take him up there. So we'll go up there next year. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. We'll see you all next week.